Okay, welcome Angela to this part of the meeting. Would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm Angela Williams. I'm one of the temporary assistant chief constables, and I've got district policing in my portfolio.
Thank you. So this item then is titled Serious Acquisitive Crime, and it covers a whole host of things.
Yes.
So if I could just hand over to you, is that okay? Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It is. So serious acquisitive crime, then you've got the paper, and I know you've read it.
Yeah.
And it's the second time that we've had this paper in this format. And just to be really clear, we refer to serious acquisitive crime as SAC crime, but actually includes burglary dwelling, theft of motor vehicle, theft from motor vehicle, and robbery. And I won't rehearse through the various definitions, but it's all the volume crime that affects people across West Yorkshire, household or vehicular. You can see from the report it does make reference to the fact around the National Crime Recording Standard, as it did in the last report, and around our drive and determination to record crime that has taken place both ethically and in line with our standards. And you can see from the report as well that all forces are going this way around ethically recording crime. Various levels, it's got to be said, but there's only one force that has seen a decrease in recorded crime at the moment, and that's in relation to Cumbria. And the HMIC has recently given us some good feedback about our crime recording, so I think that's important to set that context. You can see in the report it talks about a 28% increase in recorded crime when comparing the last 12 months to 12 months previously. But actually we've done quite a lot of work to try and understand that, and our estimation is around there is a genuine 4% increase, so not 28, but 4% increase of being a future victim of crime. So that's the really crime that we're focusing in on. And the report talks about that burglary, whilst it's seen a smaller increase, around 10% in relation to burglary, again it's 4% about being a victim of crime moving forward. The report talks a little bit around crime prevention and about what we're doing in relation to crime prevention moving forward. And you'll be pleased to know I met only with Chris Joyce yesterday, and he talks about 3 members of staff he's now got. We've probably de-invested in crime prevention over the years because of the cutbacks, etc. But now he's got 3 new starters that start with him this week or next week to help him in his crime prevention work, which I think is a real positive sign for us and for the residents of West Yorkshire. And we have just yesterday signed off our summer burglary campaign, which obviously goes out at Easter. We've signed off the artwork for that from a police point of view, and then it'll come down to yourselves to have a look at that as well. So he was certainly quite excited about having that extra lift of staff to be able to focus in on this. Some other changes that the report mentions are around how we now record our crime. And I know, we've got the new Force Crime Management Unit that started late last year. They started taking live crime from the 6th of February, so only really recently, and things are going very well with that. But some of the new matters we've put in to our processes are around recording crimes within 24 hours, taking crimes from a third party, even if the offender is under 10 years of age, still having a proportionate investigation into that, and sexual offences and domestic abuse are recorded at source as well, which really gives us a real good look at what our crime looks like. The report outlines around our satisfaction rates, and whilst our satisfaction rates generally across the board have reduced by about 6%, and I know we've spoken about that before, actually satisfaction rate for victims with burglary victims still is very, very high at 91%, which I'm certainly very pleased about. If I can just take you to the end of the report as opposed to going into the individual crime types, I've picked out the main ones there. We've had a real focus in the last few months around back to basics, which is at paragraph 46. We've had a real focus around vulnerability, we've had a real focus around safeguarding, domestic abuse, CSE, human trafficking, but actually we have gone back at our districts to some basics around serious acquisitive crime being incredibly important to us, around our local SLTs, having that focus, having that vision, really holding people to account around that, and it's featured of late over several months in the Force Accountability meeting and then in my local accountability meetings as well. And just one last point if I could just mention. just around the IOM work that we're doing. As you're aware, I chair the strategic group for the IOM, and we've had a bit of a change there, probably around 12 months ago, and at one point we just looked at SAC offenders or serious acquisitive crime offenders. Now in relation to IOM, we look at serious acquisitive crime offenders, risk of harm offenders, which are the second cohort, and then the statutory cohort, which are the MAP offenders. And whilst we have got this new cohort of risk of harm in the middle, we're really keen to continue our work with the traditional burglars and robbers and vehicle crime offenders in relation to IOM. And I'm working with Susan from your office around reducing reoffending board as well, because there is some overlap there, but actually we can both benefit from that. So we've not taken the IOFAR ball with our IOM work, even though we have had some challenges from partners around that work that was made reference to in one of our last HMIC inspections. And that's the report in totality. I don't know if you need to go into any other...
Yes, thanks, Angela, for that. So, I think you were right at the beginning, just to put things into context around the recorded crime, because I think it is difficult for the public to understand sometimes, and perhaps even for us, when, clearly we have done a lot of work to improve the ethical recording around the compliance with the new standards, and we've made some very good progress there, and clearly that has then resulted in the headlines around 25-26% increases in recorded crime, but importantly, as you set out, that for the public out there, they need to know what are the chances of them becoming a victim of crime, which, when we've done that in-depth analysis, indicates it's around about a 4% increase, yes. At which, obviously none of us want to see an increase, but it is not anything like the 25-26% of the recorded rise.
Yes, and I think whilst it's important to point that out about that 4% increase, I think moving forward we're also mindful from the 1st of April onwards there are some changes as well to how we record residential and business burglaries. So again, we've got our team trying to work out what that means for us, because if not, we've no baseline to compare ourselves to compared to last year. So whilst I think it's a confusing picture sometimes for the public, we just need to work through these changes as well moving forward.
Could you say a little bit more then about that change that's coming in on the 1st of April?
Yes, well the burglary categories will change to residential and business and community. Those are going to be the new burglary categories, because at the moment we have dwelling and non-dwelling effectively. So we're currently just working through trying to get a baseline and dip sampling which cases that we've got already would go into either category to try and work out. Because the first question I would have as a member of the public is, well, what is the real truth, or the one truth then about being a victim of burglary within West Yorkshire? So we're just trying to work through those changes, as are other forces, because it's a national change for the 1st of April with Jane Sykes.
There are some risks in this, Commissioner, which will need to be reported into the public. Yeah. First and foremost, we're not going to back record convert, because it would be an enormous amount of energy for things that have already previously been recorded. But what we will try and do is have some processes where we can do meaningful comparisons. I say that because some of the things that will now be being recorded as a burglary would not have been recorded as a burglary in the current climate. So, for example, the garden shed will now be recorded as a burglary, not a theft from a shed. So we are anticipating an overall rise in those numbers. So we just need to be really clear when we explain to the public what is going to be in these new categories, and try and get some kind of ability to be able to do that compare and contrast, so that we can determine, are they genuine increases or decreases in crime or not. So there is a little bit of, we're going to have to test the waters with this, but it's the same for everybody across the country.
And is that something you have discussed with the HMIC inspectors regarding some of the impacts of this?
Yes, we gave our feedback. I've got to say my preference would have been to stick in the current recording practice, but I can understand why the figures are changing. It's just that it's going to be a little bit confusing for ourselves and the public, in fairness, about doing those meaningful comparisons.
So, I mean, the question I was going to ask you, perhaps already answered, is what are you doing then to ensure that this transition is as smooth that it can be, to fully understand these real trends in burglary, as opposed to the recording trends?
So I suppose to a certain extent I'm going to try and avoid doing dual recording practice, because again that's an awful lot of energy that, you know, quite frankly I'd rather the resource being used in other ways. But we will do some dip sampling to satisfy ourselves with a window in time for this financial year versus a window in time for the next financial year, and we'll see whether or not that throws up some useful and helpful data.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Paragraph 17 reports around, and again you touched on this, Angela, regarding the satisfaction levels, particularly of burglary victims, which I agree, sitting at over 91%, which is very good.
Yes.
And I think we should acknowledge that.
Yes.
However, when you look at vehicle offences, it's much lower at 72% following the change in practice last year. So, although that change was necessary, I guess, with regards to the management of the demand issues here, have any processes been factored into the new Force Crime Management Unit to deal with the victims of vehicle crime, specifically given the gap that I've just alluded to?
Yes, obviously vehicle crime satisfaction at 72% is not where any of us would want to be compared to the burglary satisfaction levels. But I am mindful that one sort of affects the other, and that we are putting our resources into attending burglaries, having scenes of crime, turn up at burglaries and giving that crime prevention advice. So whilst vehicle crime now comes into the FCMU, the Force Crime Management Unit, they will thrive assess, so they will look at the crime type, but also not just the crime type, but the victim and what the victim is saying on the telephone or the email or the IT system, and they will look at threat, harm, risk, what level of investigation can be done, vulnerability and engagement. So we are still attending some vehicle crime, as we've explained before, and certainly if somebody's vulnerable, then of course we would attend that vehicle crime offence. But actually, if the car has been stolen off the driveway, then there's not a lot for us to see there, unless there's some CCTV or some house-to-house to go and do to obviously gather that information and intelligence. So now that all these crimes are going into one central point, it's no longer a postcode lottery, so therefore everyone gets the same level of service, which is a positive thing. But it's also about having that honest conversation as well, and managing expectations. In that, you know, we have a reducing, we've got higher crime rates in some areas, and actually a reducing footprint to be able to deal with them. So whilst we are trying to stack everything up, it's still incredibly difficult to attend lots and lots of volume crimes in relation to vehicle crime. But I'm happy where we need to attend vehicle crime offences. If the complainant, the victim, the witness is vulnerable, then we are still doing that. I think just on the back of that, I think it would be amiss of me not to mention around our surveying, and we obviously survey people around vehicle crime, and we've had some feedback around they didn't expect the police to attend, but then when we asked them the question, did the police come back to you? Oh no, they didn't actually. Oh well, I'm not very pleased about that, as if they thought that we may do, even though we need to be upfront at the beginning and not always just suggest maybe a little bit later that we would attend, even if we were never going to attend, if there was no positive lines of inquiry for us.
I think, to reassure you, Commissioner, the step change we've made by bringing in the Force Crime Management Unit is they are a team of investigators. So they don't just record what has happened, they actually also do an initial assessment and investigation to determine whether or not there are lines of inquiry that we can then follow up in order to be able to get a satisfactory outcome for the victim. I can entirely understand where there may be members of the public who really want us to be able to go out, to visit them in person, to look at the scene, to try and determine whether or not we are in a position to be able to identify an offender. It may well be that some further information comes down the line that we can then reopen that report. But I also want to reassure the public that the person that will be taking those details and then dealing with that crime is an investigator. as opposed to a call handler. So somebody with more enhanced skills to be able to make a determination about what we can then do with that crime report.
Okay, so that's, I understand that. I think obviously given an earlier item on the agenda around road safety, it ties into this in some respects because, vehicles, road safety is very high on the public's agenda. So I think I may have mentioned this before. Is there any possibility where neighbourhood policing teams are in the vicinity of those people potentially being tasked just to call in and speak to anyone that has been a victim, irrespective of whether there's a live lead, but it's more around that reassurance?
Yes, and after you raised it previously, because
Yeah.
Wakefield were already doing this, if
Yeah.
you recall, the other four districts were not. So after it was raised last time, at the next round of the local accountability meetings, that was raised to ask the PCSOs, because we are very lucky with our PCSO footprint, and whilst our neighbourhood footprint with officers has struggled in the past, actually our PCSO footprint has remained pretty static, which is fantastic. They now come on a morning and they will look at vehicle crimes on their patch to call in, to give reassurance across the 5 districts and not just Wakefield. We remember we're doing this and I've been doing it probably since last summertime.
Yeah. No, that I'm pleased to hear that, because I think that is just something that, not in all cases, but clearly in some cases can be looked at. In the report as well, we know we've heard about this peel and steal crime around vans. Mm-hmm. And again, you refer to white vans accounting for at least about 5%, if not more, of all vehicle crime. And obviously they tend to be targeted because they have tools and
yes.
and people working in a trade tend to keep all their. So it's that aspect is clearly something that is a bit of a worry in certain parts of our county at the moment, and
yes.
Again, it's a bit more information about the type of leads that are being followed up there.
Okay, well Chris Joyce has done a little bit of work on that to look at, is it just a West Yorkshire issue or is it wider than West Yorkshire? And he will say that whilst West Yorkshire had quite a lot of offences, there have been some from sort of across the north really, as opposed to down south when he's last given us an update. He's certainly done some work with some of the manufacturers of certain vans and sent out some notes to some of the companies as well that will particularly have work vans and fleets of work vans. But the peel and steal is work vans in general, as opposed to just white vans where they have had a concentration of when they've been stolen, when tools have been taken and the vehicles have never returned. But I think really in relation to the AMPR system as well, we've done quite a lot recently to raise the profile of what AMPR can and can't do. And there has been some interest on Facebook with people that have vans to actually let us know as soon as they've gone, because we have had cases where people have had the van stolen and they haven't come straight back to us because it's a works van. And actually we need to know straight away, because we've had a number of success stories where we've been able to track them on AMPR and recover them even with the individual's tools still in. So we've had pockets of it. I know Dewsbury got a bit of a mention at one point, as did Leeds, around the peel and steal, but I think that's vans as opposed to white vans.
So is there a campaign to sort of highlight that through social media, for example, around if it's a works van, for example, that if that's reported in,
yes.
Then, as you say, because we've got this increasing capability around automatic number plate recognition systems, that these are things that could be followed up in quick time, as it were.
I have to say, the minute now we get an emerging type of crime, our media team, together with your media team, Commissioner, start putting out messages straight away. What we would encourage people to do is to retweet them or forward them on through other social media so that the wider public get to know about some of these crime trends straight away and therefore can help us in terms of perhaps taking some preventative action themselves as well. Information around these types of crimes is also very helpful because it helps us to build up a picture as to who then to focus on, either in terms of offenders or indeed potential future victims. So again, we can get messages out through social media, through perhaps things like customer databases, to make sure that people start then taking some of their own preventative action as well.
Yeah, because as you will be aware, we often find out about these things through Twitter or social media, where sadly someone has been a victim of their vehicle or works van being targeted in that way. So it's just making sure we are monitoring those trends and picking up on them.
And also encouraging, members of the public to still carry on remembering the basics. So there's warmer weather coming, where we're already starting to get 1 or 2 crimes being reported to us through insecure vehicles, for example. So there are some things that the community can do too to help us reduce the likelihood of being a victim of crime.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I don't think, though, it is quite a fine line. Chris Joyce, if he was sat here, would talk about trying to let the companies, if it's a company-owned van, get upstream and know about it first before it goes out on social media, because what he doesn't want to do, and I understand why, is advertise this is an easy crime to do and you can do it like this. So there's a fine line. But whenever I get excited and run away with myself around we need to do this, he will say, just a moment, because we don't always want to be pushing out and advertising the fact.
Yes, no, there is a dilemma there sometimes. I agree.
Yes.
Just finally on page, paragraph 48, it refers there to emerging patterns of crimes, hotspots, locations, analysis that's done to try and deter further offences. So there's clearly a wealth of information and data that's being generated and captured. Could you just say a bit more about what work the police are doing to share this information with partners to develop, for example, with academic institutions?
Well, there's a wide range of work actually that we're doing. So if we start off in Angela's world around community safety partnerships, for example, where there are emerging issues that a partnership approach will be better suited to be able to tackle it, then we'll look at that in terms of that locality. We've done an awful lot of work with the N8 universities to look at how can we use all of this data and information to help us in terms of predictive policing, for example, so that we can try and anticipate where trends may happen. What's the evidence base is telling us around developing some of our prevention techniques, which, again, for the reason that Angela's outlined, perhaps are best not discussed in front of the open forum, but we do a phenomenal amount of work trying to work out what works in certain places and perhaps what doesn't. We also do things like trying to better understand from an offender's perspective why they may be offending and what types of crime they may be more attracted to and why, so that we can then again give better advice about how to prevent individuals from becoming victims. So we do a phenomenal amount of work in a number of different forums, but again I think this is a really good example of why it's about a partnership approach, trying to ensure that for some of these acquisitive crimes you can help us to help you reduce your likelihood of becoming a victim.
Yeah, and obviously welcome the news about the crime prevention team being bolstered somewhat, and as you're probably aware, I did run a Safer Communities grant round on crime prevention last year, just from the proceeds of crime funding, which we absolutely tried to encourage groups and community members to look at what they can do to prevent crime from being committed in the first place. So I agree with you that the public have got a huge role to play, as well as companies and other organisations in helping to protect not only themselves but people that work for them. So,
and of course we've got some fantastic examples of where members of the public have stepped forward and volunteered to help us, whether it's through Neighbourhood Watch or becoming a special constable or a police support volunteer. There are lots of people who are trying to help us, help communities, as I said, reduce their likelihood of being a victim. And again, if there are people who are watching this footage who would like to come and support us, then please get in touch.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you for that report.